You've tuned into Construction Connections, powered by CURT. This is a series of podcasts designed to bring in young professionals, seasoned professionals, owners, contractors, and others who are engaged in the construction industry and get their perspectives, experiences, and resources as well. Today, I'm really glad to have a longtime friend and a professional colleague in the person of Joe Kaufman. Joe, great to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you. So let me tell you a little bit about Joe, and then we'll dive in, and he can tell you more about what he does and why he does it. We'll explore some of the challenges they have and some of the solutions and some of the thinking that they're bringing to the table. So Joe Kaufman is referred to as a rail bridge engineer. And what that means is he'll tell you in a moment, but essentially is in the transportation business where they design bridges for railroads, as the name implies. He currently is employed at HDR, and he's been there quite a while. And he is an alumnus of the University of Cincinnati, where he earned his civil engineering degree some 8 years ago. So Joe, once again, welcome. Help us know HDR better. What do they do and how does it apply to the construction design community, the commonly called EPC, engineering and then procuring and constructing? Tell us what you do there.
Yeah, so HDR is an international engineering and architecture firm that we're based in Omaha, Nebraska since 1917. We've continued to grow as an employee-owned engineering firm that we've got 200 offices worldwide that focus on all of the civil engineering market sectors, such as transportation, which I happen to be in, as well as water, wastewater, anything to do with data centers. We're building buildings, working in the hospital medical community. So with 14,000 people worldwide, we take our clients' problems and we solve them and come up with creative alternatives that deliver for their needs.
Hey, that sounds really exciting, fun, and intriguing. And let me peel the onion. What is it that you do on a daily basis with this organization as an engineer?
Yeah, as an engineer, I work with the freight rail market sector. And so the United States, we've got 6 class 1 freight railroads, and they take goods and services from all corners of the country and move them to regional locations such as raw goods and materials, intermodal, such as your Amazon packages today, and working in their networks to move product efficiently. As we know, the freight rail is more efficient than trucking from an environmental standpoint, and they continue to improve service and meet their customers' demands using the network, the physical infrastructure to move materials.
And if we even turn the lens of the microscope one more notch, your role is in bridge design and construction. Am I right? Help me understand
Yeah.
the bridge aspect of the freight rail market.
Right. So we've got in the United States about 140,000 plus miles of track. And most of that track does sit directly on ground, but we go through some very limited and rough terrain that requires special structures to carry the track through gorges, over rivers, under obstructions. So I get to work as a structural engineer in the bridge inventory for these class 1 freight railroads. So anytime that there's some sort of an elevation change that can't be overcome by using a grade or sloping the track one way or the other, and they need to put a bridge there, or there's an existing structure that needs to be maintained so that it continue to carry the freight rail over its structures, that's where we come in to maintain traffic.
Now, do you just design primarily or do you design build? Help me understand the HDR approach.
Yeah, so HDR, we're able to do whatever our clients need. Mainly right now, the bridge infrastructure for these freight railroads is continually aging. So a
Yeah.
lot of these bridges are built pre 1900s, so 1890s, 1910, 1920, and are still in service today. And
My
so
goodness.
a lot of times they engineers that are running the maintenance of way programs for the freight railroads recognize that bridges don't last forever. And while the lines that they're running, the track that they're running on, they're kind of locked in to that specific geographic alignment. So rather than building a new track next to an existing track, they pretty much have to build a new bridge in place of the old bridge. So we get involved to help understand how to remove the old bridge that has been in service for 100 plus years and then put in a new bridge in place of the old bridge using modern technology and construction methods while also maintaining the freight rail delivery schedules. So we don't get to just shut down a line for a few months and try to figure out how to swap out these bridges. We've got maybe a 6 or 18 hour window to come in and get the job done so that the line can continue to provide service for its customers.
So that is quite a short window of opportunity. And obviously, failure is not an option during that time because, as you mentioned, the customer's got to move product and do what they were charged to do. In that environment, what has that taught you about the importance of planning and execution disciplines? What have you learned in your time there, Joe, that maybe you didn't know in the past regarding planning and execution of these projects?
Yeah, Greg, I think you hit that right on the head. The planning and the execution that goes into my role as an engineer. Engineers get a bad rap for maybe sticking their head into a bag or just kind of keeping their head away from the actual implementation of the design. And when we're talking about this type of high risk, a high reward replacement project, you have to be engaged through all of the facets of the project. Usually, the client will bring on an engineer to solve the structural problem and identifying what the solution is from a structural perspective, but it's up to the engineer to also play out how are we going to actually physically install this system and how are we going to set up a contractor for success when the window of opportunity is very very slim to hit
Yeah.
this right. So thinking through not only, well, as a structural engineer this bridge will hold, but as a contractor putting that hat on and playing the role of the contractor to help overall project success when it really counts.
Wow, that is just absolutely fascinating and frankly intriguing. It's got me kind of excited to know more about it. Your trade partners, your contractors, if you will, how do you communicate? How do you prevent breakdown in communication? What is the most important virtue of those trade partners, those contractors, from the viewpoint of the owner and the designer? What do you need from the trade contractor?
Yeah, so understanding what the contractor's capabilities are,
Hmm.
working with the freight railroads as private entities, they're able to be a little more selective on who they're bringing onto their job sites and who they're awarding contracts to. So that is another level of help that helps to filter out how um, how projects are going to get done and build in that element of communication. Right now that the owner gets to pick who they're bringing onto their jobs, they're going to bring on people that have the effective communication skills to be able to respond to the project needs and situations. And same thing goes for the designer. The expectation there that we're going to be effectively communicating and providing quality information that's going to be useful in the field when the construction and when the time frame occurs to be successful.
What are the greatest risks? What for those projects that have been delayed or maybe the window of opportunities had to be expanded from 18 to 24 hours. What causes that? What are the greatest risks in this kind of business?
Yeah, so when you get an outage scheduled from your freight railroad, and let's say they give you 12 hours, you've got to be done within that 12 hours, or somebody is going to get in a lot of trouble. And usually that's the client manager is going to end up getting in some trouble if they don't meet that window. So trying to keep regular updates with the outage schedule and be mindful of how we're designing things for the contractor to implement into the field. So, working with the contractors to understand when a challenge arises and
Yeah.
being there during the outage as an engineer, being boots on the ground with the contractor to be
Okay.
able to have the engineer mindset working alongside the contractor when it counts. So during these critical outages, we can't be sending paperwork back and forth and firing emails from an office to a field condition. You've got to answer that question as soon as it's delivered because working with a 12-hour outage, let's say, that time is ticking. And if that's holding up construction, then fingers are going to start pointing to people as to why that outage schedule wasn't met. And you hope that those fingers aren't pointed at you.
Yeah, that's for sure. When you're talking about the big 6 or the 6 class 1 railroads, what do you wish the owner, and we'll call him the owner in this case, what do you wish the owner knew about the design challenges and the construction challenges?
Yeah, I think making available and understanding the industry, what is most efficient or what is easiest to build with. So when we've got steel, we've got concrete, we've got new technologies that have developed. When some of these bridges that are 100 plus years old, the way that these bridges were built were using rivets. So you had to heat up a rivet. There was a very technical process, time sensitive, and you had to be very careful with how that was installed. And throughout the years, we've now moved to high strength bolts. So, for example, that type of technology we take for granted today. You'd never build a bridge out of rivets these days. You'd use bolts, and now since the 50s and 60s, we've been using welding to assemble bridges, and understanding that the new technology that comes out there could be other options that help to advance construction and also provide a better outcome for these bridges, especially thinking through these existing structures that have remained in service for over 100 years, trying to replace that historical structure with something that is going to provide value for decades and decades to come.
Yeah, like they did. Right. So, yeah, a couple of things I want to move on to, and that is you mentioned new technologies, one of them being high strength bolts versus rivets. What other kind of new technological advancements have you folks had to embrace that maybe wasn't even there 10 years ago? What are some other interesting technological advancements in bridge construction?
Sure. Yeah. Understanding bridge failures is another component that has helped to drive advancement. Railroads get in the habit of wanting to stick to what they know and what they're comfortable with. If it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of mentality. And so, understanding where the improvements can help to benefit and provide benefit for the owners to get more life out of existing structures and to also guarantee that these new structures that they're spending their time and money on are going to advance their network for the foreseeable future. One of those things, such as bolting, we're still going to use bolts on bridges for years and years to come. However, there are now new technologies with how bolts get installed that
Interesting.
maybe they cost a little bit more money in material, but they are a fail-proof way to make sure that a bolted connection that gets put together in the field remains connected and in service and problem-free moving forward. So
Yeah,
using
that's
that.
fascinating. Fascinating. Do you ever have any supply chain challenges, especially
Mm.
since you're working with bolts and steel? And
Yeah, yeah.
that's been a challenge in times past.
Yeah, so sourcing material, railroads like to use American-made products and materials. The last 5 years with supply chains, the material costs have gone up and down and all over the markets.
Really?
It seems like things are leveling out again and becoming more predictable, but there are changes in supply chains that take place in order to get material that's needed to build these bridges.
Yeah, interesting. You've mentioned a term a few minutes ago, modern construction methodologies. Talk to us about, in from your perspective, as a design engineer with bridges, railroad bridges in particular, what kind of modern construction methods are you seeing used that maybe weren't used in the recent past?
Mhm. Yeah, so traditionally, when you get to a railroad bridge site, you have a survey done, and that involves a person coming out with a rod, and they pick a couple points that an engineer says, "I need this corner elevation, I need this over here," and shoot that in for me. And you get maybe a handful of data points, and you've got to build a bridge that fits within the existing footprint of where that bridge is coming from. So
Mm,
new technologies, though, LiDAR scanning there to use at the front end of a project allows an engineer to provide more data for the contractor to say, hey, what's the elevation of this? Or do we have information on that? The old answer would be, no, we didn't shoot that. So we don't have that information. But now we can answer to contractors in the field and say, I've got that for you. Let me pull up that data point and I'll be able to send you that information. The other thing that is also moving forward as a very surprising in the last few years is the willingness for contractors to embrace this kind of technology. So it used to be before that
mm.
they wouldn't be interested in anything that wasn't on paper. And now we're getting to the point where, hey, do you have that? Tell you what, do you have that point cloud or that data set? We've got the program, we've got the technology, the iPad to be able to pull this information and use it in real time on our project site. So we're seeing technology being embraced by contractors because it provides a benefit to them when they're out in the field.
Wonderful. So part of this has to be AI. How has your organization? How is HDR? How is HDR utilizing AI and decision making, planning, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so AI is obviously a big component in the industry here, and the reality is we've got thousands of bridges across the country that different span lengths, different parameters, different material types, but they're all aging, and they're all going to need to be replaced or maintained. And the more that we can work as a company, as an industry, to regulate and simplify the replacement options and not necessarily have to reinvent the wheel every single time we come to a bridge site that, oh, we've got one of these bridges, it's 75 feet long, and this is the method. How are we going to solve this problem? Well, using AI for database and using the AI technology to say, hey, we've done one of these projects that's also 75 feet long that had these beam characteristics and this type of structural component. It gives you a step forward in the design process to be able to either reuse or reconsider what's already been done in the field. So that is going to, I think, help the design process. But
Right.
then also, as we design more streamlined, contractors are going to receive a more streamlined product that is more familiar for them to build out in the field. And I think
Yeah.
that's where a lot of the benefit comes from is being able to provide something that is familiar becomes less risky or appears to be less risky from a contractor's perspective, which ultimately would serve the owner in a more efficient design and construction process and maybe make that dollar work a little further.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's I'm going to take a slight little executive privilege, if you will, and share with our listeners slash viewers the fact that Kurt is also embracing AI. Many months ago, about 10 now, we began a discussion with the finest AI minds at the University of Cincinnati Lindner College of Business and discussed with them a solutions portal development that will take all of the current body of knowledge from the last half decade, the last 5 years, bring it into a contained space and allow that to be accessible to our members and let them ask any question in any language and get citable, traceable responses from that. So over, I think, 30,000 additional elements from white papers, benchmarking surveys, magazine articles, every PowerPoint presentation, every owner blueprint, every panel discussion, every conference presentation, everything that we've ever created that would be considered the current body of knowledge has been synthesized and made usable for our members in what's called the CURT Solutions Portal, or CSP, powered by Commodore. It is free to every CURT member. And think of it as a construction consultant in your pocket. Oftentimes we go to conferences or CURT meetings, CURT conferences, and you see people taking pictures of various PowerPoint slides, and data indicate that well over 70% of that information is never really acted upon or used in a practical way without a whole lot of effort of digging it out and doing some work. Who said it? When was that presentation? How did I get a hold of it? What did it say? Does it have the answer I need? So the CURT solution portals allow our members to, in any language, input it, ask it a question. It doesn't hallucinate. It's a contained environment, so it only uses our data and it gives you sites. In addition, we've put all the OSHA regulations that pertain to construction in this CSP, the CURT Solutions portal. And so when you ask it a safety question, it'll bring an answer from multiple citations from, as I mentioned, all those different things, presentations, PowerPoints, white papers, blueprints, etc., and cite it and bring you the relatable OSHA citation. So if you want to know more, if you're listening and you want to know more about the CURT Solutions portal, our answer to AI, our way of embracing AI, I encourage you to go to CURT.org. That's our website, simply CURT.org. And you can find contacts in there, connect with our office. We'll do a demo for you. And as I said, it's available to all the CURT members free of charge. So wanted to take that opportunity, Joe, while we were talking about AI, to share with our listeners our response to that. Talk to us about the unique safety challenges of your job. Obviously, as an engineer, you've got to design safely. It's got to be reliable, cost effective, probably. And I know the contractor really deals with safety in the field, but what role does safety play at the design table?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, working around trains is very dangerous. Their trains don't stop for people, and trying to keep people away from trains is a very paramount design parameter. So
Mm.
anything we can
Mhm.
do through construction phasing or thinking about the design from a sense of how do we build the majority of this structure off to the side or away from trains so that we can keep people away from the live tracks as necessary.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you coordinate with the contractor on safety in the field, and how does it relate to the guy turning the wrench on the track or on the bridge?
Yeah, sure. As part of our deliverables, we often include a site layout. So, taking again a step further in the design process to come up with a plan set and actually look at the site and say, where are the materials going to come and be placed? Where is the crane for this bridge outage? Where is that going to be? Can it be away from the tracks so that that's one less variable that could present challenges and keep people away from trains during construction. So, and then working with the contractor if they have other ideas for how things could be executed in the field, work with them and make sure that they're able to achieve their goals while keeping safety paramount.
Yeah, that's so true, so true. What about workforce? So that's the
Mm.
buzzword everywhere these days,
Yeah.
whether it's professional or trade professionals or engineering professionals, getting the right workforce with the right qualifications, where and when you need them at the right time, has been nigh on impossible in some areas. How has your organization, HDR, addressed this whole concept of workforce development?
Yeah, there's a couple things to draw from that, Greg. Great point. With our freight railroads, they just announced their 2026 maintenance of way projections. So that includes any capital funding for keeping trains moving on tracks. And they're slated to spend $6+ billion of infrastructure just for the maintenance of way components that are going to keep trains running here in the United States for 2026. And
Is that more or less than it's been in the past?
it's about as much as what it was last year with a
Okay.
slight trend upwards. So recognizing that the infrastructure is aging and trying to stay ahead of bridge maintenance and other structures maintenance and the right of way for these trains is something that's important to the railroad from an operation standpoint, and ultimately their shareholders are the ones driving this investment in capital to
Yeah, that's
continue to
right.
guarantee results and future projections.
So you've got what you need in terms
Mhm.
of dollars spend.
Sure.
How do you attract kids to bridge work?
Yeah, good question, and we see that here in the design side. Again, I started as a highway bridge engineer, and I didn't really know that there was a freight railroad path
Right.
here to take a private industry with a bridge knowledge and apply that to something as specific a niche as the railroad.
Yeah.
So I think there's some awareness that can be brought out for the freight railroad industry, and recognizing that it is a unique pocket of engineering. But also, what we're seeing is construction workforce. The railroads hire a lot of in-house workers, and we've seen workforce there, boots on the ground, working for the Class One freight railroads. That's an aging population, and
Oh, yeah.
there are more experienced people leaving the railroad for retirement. They've been there for
Yeah.
40, 45 years, and backfilling that role, you really can't replace that knowledge that is walking off the job site to retirement. And so I think there's a big challenge with the freight railroads to hire younger people that are also it's very interesting work, and everybody that works on the railroads is very much interested and passionate about freight trains and moving rail and goods and services on these lines. So that's something I think everybody shares in common. But how do you continue to replace that experience of
Yeah.
people who know how to install rivets? Again, it's not like we use it every day, but every once in a while, there's a project where we need to remove or replace this rivet. Who knows how to do that? I don't know. We haven't had somebody install a rivet on this gang team or that team, but trying to understand what type of knowledge is sunsetting as as retirement approaches.
Yeah. Are you finding you're bringing back and redeploying senior retired talent as a solution?
Mm. Yeah, so it is, I'd say there is a possibility or that people would retire from the railroad and then come back to work on like a consulting side of things
Yeah. That's right.
with a little bit of a different lens. There are opportunities for those that start in the field working directly for the class ones to come and join a company like HDR, but maybe from a designer's perspective or owner's representative rather than being directly in the railroad workforce. But at the end of the day, the majority of work that is getting performed to maintain and build these railroad infrastructures is done directly by those employed by the railroad. And so
So
their
they
work.
self-perform? Is that what I hear you say?
Yeah, so there's a good mix of self-perform as well as consultant perform work that happens here in the
Interesting.
railroad.
So
Yeah.
they don't totally rely on a trade partner, on an outside contractor.
Correct. Yeah. So
Interesting.
there's a good portion of money that is self-performed by the railroads, and when we get hired as a outside consultant, one of our first questions usually is, "Are you doing? Is this a self-performed job, or is
Yeah.
this a job that you're relying on an outside contractor? Because an outside contractor may have availability to different resources." That could help influence how we approach a job or a maintenance activity,
Interesting.
yeah, versus the railroad.
So what do those high performance collaborative work teams look like, Joe?
Mhm.
And how do you build trust among those? I
Yeah.
find out in the construction industry, it's a people business where relationships matter and nobody trusts anybody else.
Yeah.
So you've got to somehow bridge, no pun intended, the gap there, build the trust, and link up the relative or the yeah the relevant stakeholders. What do those collaborative work teams look like, and how do you build trust among those? What's being done these days to build collaboration?
Yeah, to build a collaboration which leads to trust.
Yeah,
The clients there, they they get to kinda work with whoever they wanna work with. It's their private money. So recognizing that as an engineer, we strive to perform and outperform, and deliver beyond expectation And that means going the extra mile, really setting a deadline and sticking to it or beating it, doing what we can to improve that, but also developing something that is going to guarantee success. From a
Mm,
it
yeah.
all starts with from the design side of things, and
Mhm.
whatever. If we can simplify something, a field of an approach for a contractor to actually come in and do the work that they need to do in the most efficient way, it makes everybody look good. So I guess thinking through from a designer's approach, imagine being the contractor who's under the gun and under the pressure of having to perform the work goes a long way in the overall outcome. And that building trust between the designer and the contractor, when you can present a plan set that says, here you go, this is a very simple approach to a very complex problem with multiple avenues and options for success. You start to prove to the parties that are all related that the success for this project is easily obtained, and that helps to make everybody want to come to the
Yeah.
table and work together.
Yeah, I think so. Now you mentioned before, we started the podcast that y'all take co-ops and you hire from the region's schools of engineering. What are the characteristics of a successful co-op on your projects? What does he or she need to have? What do they need to be capable, passionate about, etc., willing to work hard toward? And secondly, what's attracting these co-ops to organizations like HDR?
Mm,
You mentioned
mhm.
that you were employee-owned, for example. But
Yeah,
let's go back to the, characteristics of the successful young entrant. Maybe not co-op, maybe they're
sure.
relative new hires.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about what you're looking for or what HDR is looking for there.
Yeah, well, considering that freight railroad, the market here is kind of a niche market, we do hire a lot of times we hire somebody that has no background in railroad. And so
Yeah,
coming in and being eager to learn, that's something I strive to do every day is learn something new inside of the field of keeping the trains running. So the willingness to learn, the ability to pick up on technical tasks, and really you can be a great designer, but if you can't communicate to your owner, the situations and what's going on and how we're working to strive to solve their problem, that goes a long way to being successful in this industry. So strong communication, willingness to learn, and ability to take ideas, put them on paper, and communicate them.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for so true, so true. Looking ahead, what do you think the next generation of infrastructure work looks like? Now, these bridges, somebody did a good job back in the late 1800s because we're
Mhm.
still rolling freight on these old-timey bridges. So they were pretty dang successful in what they did when they did it with what they had to work with. Where do you see the future of this infrastructure, um, deployment of capital for infrastructure going, Joe? And I know you haven't been there long, but long enough to probably
Yeah.
be able to have an opinion on the question.
Sure. Yeah, the freight railroad has been here for the last 150, 200 years, and wanting to continue to advance the infrastructure to last the next 100 to 200 years is something that owners are striving for.
Yeah,
Rather than just looking to the next 10 or 20 years, we've got to
yeah,
be future proofing the approach to railroad structures. And sometimes that means oversizing beams or details that are maybe in excess of what the design would call for, but knowing that there's some extra built in so that in 50 or 70 years, when things begin to deteriorate, rather than responding to a bridge failure, you're able to respond to a maintenance task and continue to run trains. So working with the owners to understand what's important to them, and then also being an advocate for the longevity of what's needed to continue to run trains for years to
yeah.
come.
It sounds so exciting, and I didn't give it much thought until we invited you onto the podcast. I mean, railroads are that's an exciting business, and driving up and down I-75 between Glendale and my downtown office, I wish more freight was moved on rail and get rid of some of that trucking. So you mentioned, 40 minutes ago, how it was more environmentally friendly. What's the biggest challenge you think the railroads have? Now we've talked design of the bridge and the transportation challenge and the use of
Mhm.
AI and the characteristics of new employees and the importance of trust and collaboration. But as an industry, what do you think the greatest challenge is? Is it Washington? Is it the state houses? Is it the public sentiment? Is it aging infrastructure that makes it increasingly dangerous, perhaps? What, in your opinion, is the greatest challenges that your customers have?
Yeah, I think the customers and the freight railroads themselves is staying relevant to the shipping industry. Greg, you
Mm,
mentioned seeing all those trucks on 75 driving up and down. I mean, that's the biggest competition right now is
yeah,
the shipping and trucking that's happening in our country. And part of the reason there's many advantages to shipping something on a semi truck up and down and
yeah,
trying to convince the railroads to play along the same game to provide similar benefits to their
yeah.
end line customers is going to continue to grow the rail industry. One of my
Yeah, I think so too. Go ahead. I think I
one
cut
of
you
my
off.
first questions when I started in freight rail was, "Why don't we just ship everything by truck? Why do we even need the rail infrastructure?"
Ooh,
And the
good luck to
reality
you.
yeah, so good question. Luckily, somebody very intelligent was in the room to help answer it. Uh, but, I mean, the amount of raw materials such as coal and gravel and lumber, transformers, large, heavy haul items that are not really built to run on public infrastructure need to be shipped and transported using these freight rail networks. So we can,
Mhm.
as more things move or seem to move to freight trucking, uh, that does add an additional demand to our existing public infrastructure.
Yeah, that's
So being careful about moving heavy things on freight rails and potentially other things on the highway system, but the freight network plays a huge role in continuing to move goods and services around the country. So keeping that
yeah, that
relevant.
I think it is relevant. It sounds to me, from my perspective, like it is. You mentioned that there were 6 Class 1 railroads, right?
Mhm.
What is Class 2? Is there a Class 2 or a Class 3, and what constitutes the
Yeah.
various classes?
Yeah, so class 1 mainly describes that's your trains that are moving like 60 mile an hour between states and long hundreds of miles of stretches without making any stops. So that's
Woo!
doing a lot of the heavy hauling. And then we've also got our regional short lines, and so that'll take your they'll break the trains up a little bit and then move the goods and services closer to the end destination. Uh,
Is that considered Class 2?
yeah, class 2, more, short line would be more
Short
of
line.
yeah, more of what the industry would use to describe that. So and then short lines, and then you have your endpoint delivery, which a lot of freight rail right now gets you within a 20 or 25-mile radius, and then that final haul is sometimes done by, the freight trucking companies. If you have raw goods and materials, a lot of that is delivered straight to the site via a rail spur or specific
Mhm.
track to get you to your final destination.
Are railroads being increasingly used to move construction materials? I mean, we got some mega projects going on, whether it's data centers, energy, big pharma over in Indiana, just some huge projects. Are you seeing rail relied on frequently to bring in construction materials for projects? Joe, one of the questions I have is, are you seeing, just as a matter of curiosity, rail being used, whether it's class 1, 2, or 3, to move construction materials to these mega projects? As you know, billion-dollar projects are the norm. The president jumped on the plane to China and came back with $200 billion for the construction when we can't handle what we have now. It's like, but how is the construction industry relying on the rail transport business to bring construction materials right to a site? You know anything about that? Have any intel on it?
Yeah, yeah. So great question. The data center industry right now is obviously booming nationwide,
Yeah.
and a lot of those the data center equipment, such as electrical transformers, that's one of the big
Oh yeah.
challenges. They're usually built in Mexico or somewhere else and are shipped to a shoreline here in the United States. And then you have to figure out how to get this really, really heavy and oversized piece of equipment to its final destination. Let's say in the Midwest, in Columbus area, Amazon's got a couple different data centers that are going in just south of downtown, and they were able to bring in a transformer up the Ohio River and use again an alternative alternative mode of transportation on the waterway there, and using the barges to move large goods and services. And originally, the answer was to put that on an oversized freight truck and then
Ugh.
close down highways, move
Ugh.
overpasses, and get a permit through the state of Ohio to move this transformer hundreds of miles on public infrastructure. And instead, they were able to turn to their short line operators in the region and say, hey, we've got this way oversized, really heavy piece of equipment, um, transformer that's very important to what we're building here in central Ohio. Can you help us get this to where it is? The research was done. The railroad was able to return a response that was not only more cost effective, but it simplified the movement of the goods and services to the job site. And so they were able to demonstrate this through one of their transformers that recently got within, they were able to get it within a half mile of the project site, and then use a truck to get it to its final destination very easily without all the headaches of moving across the state. And everything
Fascinating.
went super great. Everybody was thrilled with the outcome. The freight railroad was happy because that's their business, is moving big, heavy things. And the public should be excited about it because that's less stress on their public infrastructure that taxpayer dollars are directly funding. And then with that success, the freight railroads were able to obtain even more business because guess what? Not just one location here in central Ohio, not to mention that they had 20 or so of these transformers that were coming in. So now we get to repeat the process 19 more, which is a huge benefit for the freight railroad from a revenue standpoint. Amazon and data centers are happy because they just saved a whole bunch of money. But
Yeah.
now we can use that as a similar approach nationwide and rely on our rail infrastructure instead of the trucking method that is so commonly the default.
Just fascinating. So, how does an organization like HDR and a representative like you know about all that? Did you all have a role to play in that?
Not officially, we didn't have an official role, but I did happen to know somebody who was working at the data center there in
Ah,
south of Columbus, and I said, he's like, "We've got this big problem. We're gonna have to bring this transformer in, and the permits and all this. It's gonna be months of lead time, a bunch of headache. We're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to get this, just to get the permit from the state to move the freight the load." I said, "Well, aren't there rail networks somewhere?" He's like, "Actually, yeah, there is a rail spur literally half a mile from the job." And they were able to get in conversation, and I got a picture maybe a half year or year later of a transformer on a rail car. I was like, well, I didn't get paid for it. I can't necessarily take the credit, but yeah, I think it
I
was
guarantee you, you're his new best friend. Trust me.
but yeah, it was kind of a hard push on his end to
Yeah.
convince those that were constructing to say, hey, like, why don't we take this, what they seem to be a non-conventional approach, and
Yeah.
move this by rail rather than by truck. And once they realized how simplified the process becomes, it seems like there's more opportunity to move more and more construction goods and services on a freight rail network.
Absolutely fascinating. Is there something you want to leave us with that I didn't ask about? Or is there a question you were prepared to take a shot out that I never asked as we wind down our time together? Give you kind of the last word here, Joe.
Sure. Yeah, I think as we talk about maintaining infrastructure and looking through working with the owner, the designer, and the contractor, usually that gets broken up into bits and pieces throughout the project life cycle of how we approach solutions. But I'd say as a designer, the more that I can work as a contractor or design as if I have to be the one to build it, the more benefit that it brings to the owner, ultimately, from potential cost savings or schedule savings or simplification, but also just thinking about the people in the field who have to
Mhm.
build something that I'm designing. So that's a big weight and responsibility I think we as designers hold should hold ourselves to. And I always like to think of myself being that guy with the hard hat on and the yellow vest with the plan set in my hand, standing right next to somebody who has to do the work.
Yeah.
And if there was an easier way or a simpler way to do it, to do the work that's being asked, I try to think of that before it hits the job site so that we can move forward. Everybody can have smiles on their face, and I feel like we're achieving a common goal, working together as an owner, a designer, and a contractor to maintain infrastructure here in the United States.
As it should be. What a great final comment. We've been talking to Joe Kaufman, longtime friend and colleague, and he is a rail bridge engineer with the prominent HDR organization, which designs the bridges and helps goods continue to flow as they should to fuel our economy. Joe, it's been a real delight to hang out with you today, and I want to thank you for taking some time to be with us.
Greg, thank you for the opportunity.
So to our listener, you've been listening to Construction Connections, powered by CURT, and we will catch you at the next episode. Thanks for listening.